Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. And we begin in America on a rather sad note where first responders are still in desperate search for survivors after a military helicopter collided with a plane near Reagan Washington National Airport in Virginia Wednesday night. No fewer than 30 bodies have been so far recovered from the Potomac. The American Airlines flight traveling from Wichita, Kansas, collided with the military chopper while approaching runway 33 at the D.C. airport around 9 p.m. The American Airlines regional passenger jet was carrying 64 people when it collided with a helicopter and crashed into the frigid Potomac River near Reagan Washington National Airport. Several members of the figure skating community were aboard the jet. Separately, Russia's state news agency said 2 world champion Russian figure skaters were also on the plane.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
President Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, has sparked controversy by blaming diversity policies under former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden for poor safety standards. This comes after a deadly crash between a military helicopter and a passenger plane over Washington. Trump claimed that the previous administrations prioritized policy over safety, citing a supposed directive that deemed certain groups too white. He emphasized his commitment to safety, stating that competency should be the primary consideration.
Within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's one of the reasons I won. But they actually came out with a directive, too white. And we want the people that are.
For more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Afia, too white to interesting times. Tell us what's the latest on the aircraft. Let's start there on the air crash.
We'll start with that. We'll get to President Trump's comments. But let's focus on the air crash, and let's focus on the fact that at the moment we are being told that there are no survivors, that this is now turned from a rescue operation into an operation to salvage the bodies. 28 bodies so far have been found. Most of those were actually in the American Airlines passenger jet. 1 body has been pulled from the helicopter. Remember, the American Airlines jet was carrying 64 people, and there were 3 soldiers on board the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter.
And the president gave a press conference in the White House just a few hours ago. And what did he say? Let's start there.
Yeah, so the U.S. president began his press conference with a moment of silence for the victims of the air crash. And then he went on to do his usual ad-libbing during that briefing. He went on to say that his administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation, saying that you need to be a very special genius to coordinate air traffic. He said that I put safety first, referring to his first term. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. He also went on to say, or to suggest, that diversity, equity, and inclusion was to blame for the crash happening, saying that there had been weakened standards by air traffic controllers, and saying that the FAA was actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions. And he also also went on to speculate on what happened, saying that the passenger plane was doing everything right and coming into the path. And he also said a confluence of bad decisions caused the crash. Now, authorities have not yet released any details on the cause of the crash. The president saying that it's a tragedy that should never have happened. Perhaps he has been briefed more than the media have. But really what we are seeing here is a president who should be right now uniting the United States of America at this time of grief, the worst air disaster for many, many years. But instead, he is making this a political issue and proceeding to sow those seeds of division and polarization, not acting very presidential.
Not acting very presidential indeed. What can you tell us about the passengers on board the American Airlines flight and also the helicopter?
Well, yes, we're just finding out some details now about some of the 64 people that were on board that American Airlines jet, and they were members of the skating community. There was a skating event happening in Kansas. That's where they were flying from into Washington, D.C. So as many as 14 American members of the skating community have been feared dead, and they all came from a particular skating club in Boston. So their CEO has been talking, and he said, to the best of our knowledge, 14 skaters returning home from this national development camp at Wichita in Kansas, put on by U.S. figure skating, were lost in the plane crash. 40 of those 14 skaters, 6 were from this particular skating club in Boston. So they were coaches Nadim Nawalov, Evgenia Shishkova. They were Russian former world champions. They were a married couple who won the world championships in pairs figure skating in 1994. Russian state media actually named them earlier on today, and that has been confirmed. And the other victims are Jenna Han and her mother Jin Han, and Spencer Lane and his mother Christine Lane. They've also been named as well as victims of this crash. Now, the International Skating Union are absolutely devastated and heartbroken by this loss from their skating community, and we can expect more details about those losses to come up in the next few days.
Afia, many thanks for doing this. We appreciate you for coming on. Afia Hagen, our international correspondent, giving us a bit of insight following the crash over Washington's airport there in the U.S. Well, so in America, Donald Trump says thousands of migrants will be housed in new Guantanamo Bay detention center. The U.S. president said up to 30,000 migrants who cannot be returned to their home countries will be held at the notorious naval base and military prison on the island of Cuba. For News Central, international correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
President Donald Trump signed a directive instructing the federal administration to ready the U.S. naval facility at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to accommodate tens of thousands of migrants. The directive instructs the Defense and Homeland Security departments to establish additional confinement facilities at Guantanamo for high-priority criminal aliens illegally residing in the United States.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them, because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
Trump's announcement preceded his signing of the Laken Riley Act, which mandates the detention of undocumented migrants accused of specific offences. Parliament approved it earlier this month with backing from Democrats. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel expressed strong opposition to Trump's strategy to house the tens of thousands of migrants at Guantanamo Bay, calling it an act of savagery on X. Whilst the facility is notorious for its detention centre, where the United States detains terror suspects, Guantanamo Bay also operates a separate migrant processing facility. However, a U.S. official has indicated that the installations at the facility are nowhere near ready to accommodate up to 30,000 migrants. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has issued a stern warning to U.S. President Donald Trump, vowing to retaliate if Trump hikes tariffs on Brazilian products. If he taxes Brazilian products, Brazil will reciprocate in taxing products exported from the United States. Lula declared this at a press conference. The 79-year-old president also slammed Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization, calling it a step back for human civilization.
É muito simples. Se ele taxar os produtos brasileiros, haverá reciprocidade no Brasil em taxar os produtos brasileiros. Taxar os produtos que são exportados para os Estados Unidos é simples. Não tem nenhuma. O Trump foi eleito para governar os Estados Unidos e eu mandei na carta para ele que eu espero que ele tenha uma boa governança para os Estados Unidos. Eu fui eleito para governar o Brasil. Eu quero respeitar os Estados Unidos e quero que o Trump respeite o Brasil. Obviamente que eu acho que esse negócio de descumprir o Acordo de Paris, de, dizer que não vai dar dinheiro para o OMS, é uma regressão à civilização humana.
In South America, Chilean President Boric has praised the passage of a historic pension reform law, calling it an enormous achievement in the country's efforts to address social inequality. The new legislation ends decades of a privatized pension system, a remnant of Augusto Pinochet's military rule since 1973 to 1990, which required workers to contribute 10% of their salaries into private retirement plans without employer contributions. Pension reform was a key demand of the 2019 mass protests, which erupted over economic inequality, leading to months of violent clashes, dozens of deaths, and hundreds of injuries. Under the new law, employers will now contribute 8.5% of a worker's salary in addition to the existing 10% employee contribution, with funds allocated to both private pension plans and a new public social security fund.
2.800.000. El Congreso Nacional acaba de aprobar una reforma histórica al sistema de pensiones. Gracias a ella, 2.800.000 personas mayores, abuelos, abuelas, madres, padres, trabajadores y trabajadoras de toda una vida, verán aumentadas sus pensiones. Este es un tremendo logro para Chile. Es un imperativo ético y un acto de justicia, de profundo cariño y de respeto por nuestra gente, que responde a la que es, sin lugar a dudas, una de las deudas más grandes que arrastra nuestro país. Y es que esta reforma es el avance más importante en materia previsional de las últimas décadas, que se construye sobre otros avances de gobiernos anteriores, como de la presidenta Bachelet y el presidente Piñera. En concreto, va a significar el mayor aumento en las pensiones desde la creación del sistema en los años 80. Por eso le hablo a las mujeres de nuestra patria. Con esta reforma, sus pensiones aumentan y se corrige la discriminación injusta que han sufrido en materia previsional. Hemos dado un nuevo paso hacia un trato justo para ustedes, hacia una sociedad en donde hombres y mujeres realmente tengamos los mismos derechos.
You're watching stories from beyond the continent. We're going on a short break. When we return, Sweden pledges $1.2 billion in Ukraine and aid for Ukraine aid. This and more after the break. Join us again. And welcome back. And now to Europe, where European Home Affairs ministers gather in Warsaw for an informal meeting. Migration is high on the agenda, with far-right electoral gains in several countries leading to a hardening of Brussels' posture on irregular arrivals. The European Union is considering setting up migrant return centers outside its borders, sparking debate among Home Affairs ministers. The proposal, dubbed Return Hubs, aims to facilitate the transfer of failed asylum seekers back to their countries of origin. However, the concept raises significant legal and ethical concerns, including cost, legal regimes, and the treatment of those who cannot be returned. The idea is part of the EU's effort to reform its migration policies, with less than 20% of people ordered to leave the bloc currently being returned. Poland, which holds the EU's rotating presidency, is pushing for stricter deportation rules. Sweden has pledged an additional $1.2 billion in military aid to Ukraine, the country's largest package to date. Defense Minister Paul Johnson says the package signals Sweden's long-term commitment to supporting Ukraine and encourages other European allies to take more responsibility. The aid includes procurement of new arms, support for Ukrainian production of long-range missiles and drones, and donations from the Swedish armed forces. This brings Sweden's total military support for Ukraine to $5.6 billion. The move demonstrates Sweden's commitment to supporting Ukraine's defense against Russia's ongoing invasion.
Det är också då det största stödpaket som Sverige har lämnat till Ukraina sedan den fullskaliga invasionen bröt ut under februari 2022. Alltså det här är en stark signal till Ukraina om Sveriges mycket omfattande åtagande gentemot Ukraina och Ukrainas säkerhet. Till att vi i det här paketet också finansierar ukrainska satsningar på långräckviddiga system, både långräckviddiga drönare och långräckviddiga raketer som de har efterfrågat. Det är inte bara Ukraina som befinner sig i en mycket utsatt position, det gör även Moldavien. Moldavien har ju relativt nyligen genomgått ett val och man är utsatt för olika typer av destabiliseringsoperationer från Ryssland och man är i ett stort behov av både civilt och militärt stöd, inte minst för att kunna bygga upp en starkare motståndskraft mot de här hybridoperationerna.
Georgian rights activists are sounding the alarm on what they call a growing campaign of repression by the government, accused of undermining democracy and cozying up to Russia. The country has been rocked by daily mass protests since the Georgian Dream Party's disputed election win in October, which sparked outrage and allegations of vote rigging. Activists claim the government has sanctioned a wave of intimidation, beatings and arrests against protesters. Pata Shamingai, a prominent poet and rights activist, described the situation as systemic torture, with reports of masked men abducting and brutally beating people, including minors.
ვარაუდი, ანუ არაფერი არ მაძლევს იმის საშუალებას, რომ ვიფიქრო, რომ ეს რამე პოლიტიკური დაკვეთა არ იყო და მიზანმიმართულად დაშინებას არ ემსახურება, იმიტომ რომ შემხმარი სისხლები გარშემო თავს ვიცავდი, ანუ ეს ხელით რო არ დაეძიანებინეთ, მე მოხდებოდა თანსახის დაზიანება უნდათ რა. მოკლედ ერთი სიტყვით კარგად ვარ რა. არაფერი, უბრალოდ სულ ყველა უნდა გამოვიდეს გარეთ და
French Socialist Party MP Arthur Delaporte has criticized Prime Minister Bayrou's remarks about the feeling of submersion experienced by the French, saying they normalize far-right ideologies. Delaporte's comments come as a joint commission convenes to finalize the state budget. Bayrou, a centralist politician, has been accused of using rhetoric similar to that of far-right politicians, sparking concerns among left-wing lawmakers. The controversy highlights the challenges faced by President Emmanuel Macron's government in balancing the interests of different political groups.
Nous positionnerons sur la censure pas par rapport à ce que dit ou ce que fait le Rassemblement national. Nous ne l'avons jamais fait. Les socialistes prennent leur position de façon autonome. On n'a besoin ni des oukases des uns, ni des injonctions des autres, ni des menaces des troisièmes. Donc nous, ce que nous faisons, c'est que nous avons deux exigences. Il y a d'une part une exigence qui est d'ordre moral et républicaine. Nous ne voulons pas d'un gouvernement qui banalise les théories de l'extrême droite. C'est ce que nous avons dit extrêmement fermement au gouvernement cette semaine. On ne peut pas faire la courte échelle à Marine Le Pen en reprenant à son compte ces théories sur le grand remplacement ou sur la submersion migratoire. Et évidemment, le deuxième pilier d'une éventuelle non-censure, c'est la question qui est, à notre sens, aussi essentielle du quotidien des Françaises et des Français. Est-ce que ce budget va dégrader ou non la vie de nos concitoyens ?
And up to the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered a delay in the release of Palestinian prisoners. The move is part of a prisoner exchange deal for 3 Israeli hostages freed earlier. Netanyahu's office stated that the delay is to ensure the safe departure of the remaining hostages in future phases. A Hamas source revealed that the group is in talks with the mediators to pressure Israel into releasing the 110 prisoners as originally planned.
ברוך שובכם הביתה. מדינת ישראל כולה מחבקת אתכם, וכך גם רעייתי שרה ואני. השחרור הזה הושג קודם כל בזכות חיילינו הגיבורים, והוא גם הושג בזכות העמידה האיתנה והנחושה שהובלנו במהלך המשא ומתן. אנחנו לא נקבל את הפרת ההסכם. במהלך שחרור חטופינו היום, כולנו ראינו מראות מזעזעים. הבהרנו למתווכות שאנחנו לא מוכנים לקבל שום סיכון לחטופינו. ואני מוסיף על כך. מי שיעיז...
Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shabani announced Thursday that Syria and Qatar have discussed a comprehensive framework for cooperation on reconstruction in the war-torn country. This development comes as a visiting Qatari delegation met with Shabani in Damascus. According to Shabani, the talks covered vital sectors including infrastructure, investment, banking services, health and education. The goal is to pave the way for economic recovery in Syria. This move marks a significant step towards rebuilding Syria after years of conflict.
به سمو الأمير مع فخامة الرئيس.
لقد ناقشنا في اجتماعات اليوم إطاراً شاملاً للتعاون الثنائي فيما يتعلق بإعادة الإعمار، وغطت مناقشاتنا قطاعات حيوية بما في ذلك البنية التحتية وضمان استعادة أسس المجتمع والاستثمار والخدمات المصرفية، وتمهيد الطريق للتعافي الاقتصادي والصحة والتعليم، وضمان الوصول إلى الخدمات لكافة السوريين والطرق والمواصلات والاتصالات.
سنستمر حقيقة في تقديم الدعم المطلوب على كافة الصعد الإنسانية والخدمية، وأيضا فيما يتعلق بالبنية التحتية والكهرباء. مشاريعنا كثيرة، وما تحدث به سمو الأمير مع فخامة الرئيس هي مجالات كثيرة، ما هو متصل بالجانب الإنساني وما هو متصل أيضا بالجانب التنموي والشراكة الثنائية الاقتصادية ما بين البلدين.
And that's all we can take from beyond the continent. So you remember that you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422 on Star Times, channel 274. Find us on Avo TV and stream us live on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV. Good night.